Welcome, welcome to Free Your Voice. This is the first prayer intensive in 2022. Before I begin to tell you about it, I invite you to listen to these 3 questions and take them deeply, deeply into your heart. Number 1, when have you not said something you wanted to say, you needed to say, and later regretted, so deeply regretted not having spoken up? Question number 2, when have you been silenced, ignored, erased? This is pervasive. In this culture, we learn very quickly to be silent and erased in our families, in our schools, in our religious settings, in college, in relationships, in marriages, and at work. I think it's at work primarily that we go, wait a second. I want to speak at this meeting, and the boys just run over you. Or the most disturbing is you present an idea, they ignore you, they erase you, and then a boy brings up that identical idea, and everybody goes, what a great idea. When have you been silenced, ignored, erased? Question number 3, aware that there is such a high price for speaking up, when have you edited yourself, pulled back, kept yourself small, thinking you were keeping yourself safe? I'm Janet Connor, prayer artist, mystic witch, mistress of the thresholds, and producer and director in the Theater of the Miraculous. And I have done all 3 of these in spades. You know my stories. If you've read Writing Down Your Soul, you know that until I was 50, I was silenced. I allowed other people to silence me. And it was only in the throes of a terrifying, violent divorce that I stumbled upon when I began to write in my journal this extraordinary, loving, powerful, wise, brilliant voice that was always inside of me. This word voice, you see it in the subtitle of Writing Down Your Soul, How to Activate and Listen to the Extraordinary Voice Within. This word voice has been talking to me, pushing me, guiding me, leading me for, it'll be 25 years this April. 25 years since the first time I picked up a pen and activated that voice. And so, okay, I'm a little slow. It's taken me 25 years, but I am ready. I am so ready now to offer you a prayer intensive to free your voice. And we're taking that word voice and expanding it into 4 voices. Your physical voice, your truth voice, your ancestral voice, and your creative voice. We're going to do this with my co-teacher and great friend, Cameron Alteris, who, just like me, has had to dig deep into her true voice and finally speak despite the cost. And the cost, as you will hear, was very, very high. But freedom only comes when we speak with our true, authentic, holy, powerful, embodied voices. So, to help you get a feel for this unusual first prayer intensive in 2022, I would like to do 4 things for you. Number 1, I got to tell you the story. If you've been in any of my intensives, if you've watched any of these videos, you know there's always a wild story. These are not ideas that I read about in a book or think it would be profitable for me to produce. This ain't self-help, honey. These are always experiences that I have, mystical experiences that wake me up, that I then gather other people who have had similar experiences and say, hey, let's offer a prayer intensive. And that person is Cameron Alteris. And so, of course, I want to give you an opportunity to meet her. Get your hat on, hang on to your hat. It's a wild story. Very briefly, introduce you to the 4 voices, the 4 weeks, and the 4 prayers. They're going to free those voices. And then, I always close these videos with an invitation to come and join us. But that's not what we're doing today. Cameron and I, of course, invite you. Why else are we creating this? Why else are we making this video? We're going to let the rock stars invite you to come to free your voice. So let's start with the story, the background story. You can thank the word witch for free your voice. I don't think anybody on the planet is saying anything quite like that. You can thank the word witch for free your voice. Now, it happened in August of 2020. You remember 2020? That outrageous year of COVID, the first year of COVID, but what did we know? We thought it was the year of COVID. And quarantine, and we were all in this container. We were all contained at home. Well, at the beginning of August, my publisher had said, hey, Janet, we want to relaunch Writing Down Your Soul, so get some new endorsements, would you? So I did. I reached out. And Rabbi Tirza Firestone, who had led us in this stunning, intensive, revealing the path of Shekhinah in the Tree of Life, she sent me an endorsement. I was sitting right here, opened my email, and the opening line is, Janet Conner is a prayer artist, scholar, and 21st century witch. I burst into tears. I still burst into tears, you can tell, every time I say that. I sat here sobbing. She sees me, somebody sees me. I was so proud of that endorsement, and I sent it off to my publisher, and I sent it off to my agent. Not 10 minutes went by, and I got an email from my agent saying, you cannot use that endorsement. You cannot allow someone to call you a witch. What do you mean I can't use the best endorsement I've ever received in my entire life from a thrilling mystic herself? Yeah. And I realized as she fought me for 2 weeks, I have to fire my agent. Now, this is a radical thing for an author to do, because the way the game is played is you don't get a contract with a name publisher unless you have a name agent. But I knew I had to fire her. My whole body just kind of, Well, on the very day that I sent that email to fire my agent, I had just completed a class on working with the dead with Perdita Finn. And in that particular class, she had told us your assignment for the week is to find your puddle. Think of the analogy of Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. The day repeats because he keeps stepping in the puddle. Well, Perdita said every single one of us has a puddle like this, and it's the reason you keep repeating the same problem in relationships or the same problem at work or the same problems in this lifetime. But surprise, the reason you're repeating it in this lifetime is you have repeated it in lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. Go find your puddle. Well, I didn't know what my puddle was, but I knew I'd better send that email to fire my agent, so I did. And the next morning in Deep Soul Writing, I realized I found my puddle, I named my puddle, and I leapt over that puddle. The name of my puddle was allowing anyone to silence my voice. Well, that word witch just kept leading the way, and I began to research witches. You see all those books? Every single one of them is about the history of witches. I was blessed to meet and fall in love with Joan of Arc, the greatest mystic witch of all time. And you let this woman in your house, you know what happened. She pushed me and guided me and pushed me to finally create the Return of the Witches pilgrimage last summer. During that pilgrimage, miraculous things happened. I'm going to tell you about 2 of them. One was, in the middle of the night in July, I woke up and clearly heard in my left ear, "Woman, speak truth." Now, you've heard me tell the story about hearing in my left ear in 2018, prayer artist, and that made a few changes. I had a feeling this was pretty much on that same level. Woman speak truth. I didn't understand what it meant, but I immediately began to grow into it. Okay, woman speak truth. This is who I am. This is what you want me to be. I will do it. The second thing that happened was in a conversation. The members of the intensive gathered to have just a conversation, no teaching. We simply listened to one another. What was your experience this month with these witches? And a young woman, mother of 3 or 4 children, she began to tell a story about the impact listening to Queen Jezebel's story had on her. And she said that suddenly she knew, she remembered, it was almost like a vision, that she had been strangled to death by a husband she loved and who she was confident loved her, but he was swept up in this insanity of witches are evil, we have to kill the witches even if they are our wives. Now, that alone was, I get goosebumps telling you the story. But the real miracle is that after she finished telling us this realization, she began to cry and said, I realize now, in this lifetime, married to a wonderful man with wonderful children, I still keep myself silent, quiet, safe, small, and thanks to Queen Jezebel, no more. I must speak. Well, as she's telling the story, Cameron Alteris, who is in that same community, begins to talk about her experience with the voice, the power of freeing your voice. And she begins to tell us about her sister who helps people free their voices. It's my great honor right now to introduce you to Cameron Alteris. Would you tell us the story of freeing your voice and a wee bit about your sister Charla and the work she does to free our physical voices?
Thank you, Janet. It is an honor to be here with you. I am, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about the so many experiences that I also have had, really from birth, about being told to be quiet, that my voice is too loud, I'm too much, rein myself in. And yes, I know the meetings too, where the men have the ideas that I've already spoken. I get it. I get it. So what you've spoken about is perhaps your particular experience, but it's universal. It really is. Many, many, many women have experienced this. I was born into a small community where the center of life was the church, and it was the Amish Mennonite church, to be specific. And within that church community, it's very much a patriarchal structure where the power and the brains and the voice, it's all male, especially in the person of the male pastor. That's the person with the most power. So silencing my voice and taking cues about when it is appropriate for a female to speak, that was bred into me from birth. I explored my voice in theater, which I loved and which I then gave up for more practical career options. I chose to go to grad school because then at least I could teach. Well, that was short-lived when my then husband refused to move to any of the places where I was offered jobs. My doctoral advisor, who was a woman, put it to me like this: well, it looks like that at some point you're going to have to choose between your husband or your career. Wrong thing to say to a woman who was born into the context where I was born, because you always put your husband first. So I silenced my wishes along with silencing my voice, and I remade myself so I could fit into a corporate career. Well, after 19 years, I faced another choice, and that was stay in my marriage and die, or leave and attempt to find new life. And finally, for the sake of my kids, who were very young at the time, I chose to leave. And in effect, I chose myself for the first time. In a mediation session on the way out of that marriage, I had what for me was really a life-changing experience. I suddenly felt the presence of so many women behind me. All I can say is they're grandmothers and generations of grandmothers. They were behind me. And even as I'm talking right now, I'm feeling this. I heard these voices. They started silently, very quietly. It got louder and louder. Say this for me. Speak for me. Speak what I can never speak. Rage my rage. And I did. I raged it. It felt like it was generations of female bile just coming out of my voice, which was the conduit for all of this pent up female anger. My poor ex-husband at the time was the one who had to receive it, but I had to get it out. Part of my raging also included coming to terms with incest at the age of 4 by my teenage uncle, and clergy sexual abuse by my former father-in-law, who was a Mennonite pastor. This time, my voice was the conduit for what I had kept silent for decades. Part of regaining my voice happened over a period of 6 years of negotiations with Mennonite church authorities to get them to finally release the name of this perpetrator. He was dead. They've never dealt with a dead perpetrator before. But finally, after 6 years, they released his name. And then 7 other women came forward. Because I freed my voice, these 7 other women could free theirs. And through this process, I also renamed myself. My former name was associated with so much abuse, and I needed a fresh slate. I needed to start over. And so I chose a name that I love. Early in 2022, my voice will be published in a book that I have been working on with a friend over the last 4 years. We've gathered 31 people from 5 different countries who are all going to be writing about various aspects of abuse of power, be it racism, colonialism, sexism, sexual abuse, heteronormatism, the whole gamut, all within the confines, the communities of the Amish and the Mennonite traditions. I've also returned to my voice through writing and performing poetry and performance art. So I've gone back to theater, which I've loved. My husband and I make these audio recordings, and we've put them on a website that we've created, which I've called Vocem Redisium, which is Latin for by returning to the voice. Now, you asked me about my sister, who has the voice of an angel. Charlotte is 5 years younger than me. And like many younger siblings, she benefited from me already clearing the path. And we've talked about it many times. It's like she grew up in a different family, let alone a different world than I did. She's always sung. We called her Little Songbird. She pursued studies in voice. She has a master's in music. And she's been on the faculty at the American Musical and Dramatic Academy in New York for almost 2 decades. And she uses a pedagogical method which frees the natural voice. It's not something to put on the voice or turn the voice into something else, but free what is naturally there. And she successfully aided in repairing voices. For example, there was a cantor who completely lost his voice. He worked with her for a period of a year and regained his voice. So I love her philosophy. She believes that we all have an authentic voice, and all we have to do is free it. So I love what she does.
So, of course, she has to be our very first guest expert in an intensive called free your voice. So I'm realizing as you're talking that when I started writing to the name is now Mother Sophia, Our Lady of the Thresholds, Queen of the Aeon, I was freeing my authentic voice in a different way. It isn't about speaking, although my first love was acting too, so we have an awful lot in common, and my freedom came through an extraordinarily difficult divorce. But I have a feeling as you're talking, just as you said, my story is your story is my story is everyone's story is this, because, and we learned this in the witch research, this silence, you either get silenced or burned, or you learn very quickly to silence yourself, to keep yourself safe, quiet, obedient, just like the image we have of Amish and Mennonite women. And so this is radical. It's ancestral, it's epigenetic, that this has been coming down to us. You were so blessed to hear your ancestors raging, do this for me. You were so blessed because you know it's real. You felt them, you heard them. As you were talking, I can't say that I am aware through my biological family that anybody is waking up to the fact that they were all oppressed. But you're reminding me, and this was heartbreaking to me, at my mother's parents' 50th wedding anniversary, it was a great big party, a big mass, the whole thing. They said their vows again, and it made me sick to my stomach that this woman who totally ran the house promised to obey. And as she said it, my body just kind of flinched. I go, yeah, well, not me, babe. I am so not willing to obey the rules and the structure, because that's patriarchy coming down to us right through the witch times. It hasn't gone away. So this is a prayer intensive. Yes, we're going to hear the history. We're going to hear feminist theory. We're going to learn to open our vocal cords. There is a massive amount of learning, but it is a prayer intensive. This is what makes it so miraculous and powerful. So there will be a total of 5 prayers. To free your voice, we're going to do a vagus nerve chant. It's real simple and it's extraordinarily powerful. To free our truth voices, Janet did not come up with this. I was awakened in the middle of the night, but I'm very excited to give it to you. A brand new, totally different anointing to free 11 voices in our bodies, to free our ancestral voices, the voices you heard, Cameron, in that divorce mediation room. We're going to all learn, receive, and begin to speak our mystic family call. This is calling on not necessarily your biological, or not only your biological lineage, but your mystic family, because you've been in a lot of bodies and a lot of different DNA lineages. They're all here, and they're the ones that are going to help us free our voices. And finally, the 4th voice is your creative voice. We're all going to write our own, short, it's 2 lines long, but it's the most powerful, creative, artistic prayer, mantra, statement you could possibly make. And then, because it is epigenetic, because it is ancestral, because it did come down to us as that young mother discovered, we are going to have a special Saturday, 2-hour, Saturday afternoons at 2 o'clock Eastern, so everyone in Europe can come live with Kahulahela, Hana Ikapono, to literally, I mean literally, release those epigenetic residues from our entire bodies, but in particular, our throats. And if you begin to sort of explore the witch history, you hear this over and over and over and over again, that people become aware of being strangled in a past life, hung in a past life, And that's in your body. Your body knows. And Kahulahela is absolutely the top person on the planet to help us release those energetic residual chains so that we can free our physical voice, our truth voice, our ancestral voice, and our creative voice. So one other thing, in addition to the fact that it's prayer intensive, is it takes place in the theater of the miraculous. Now, the theater of the miraculous was a miracle that came through in the pilgrimage. Everything I do now is in the theater of the miraculous. And it's because we gather as a community, whether you're live at any of the events or not, we are still gathering as a community with a sacred, mystical, holy prayer intention to free our voices. And when we gather as a community, we become individual containers for the divine and a collective container. And when we have this awareness that we, around the world, are a collective container, she arrives. She, by any name or nature that you know her, she is present. She is heard, she is seen, she is felt. And here's the miracle. You sign up for an event called Free Your Voice. You do the work. You read the stories. You pray the prayers. But you're not the one freeing your voice. She is. And she can do it. And she does do it. And she will do it. What can feel like a psychological extraordinary burden is easy. It's a miracle because you are not freeing your voice. Your voice is being freed by the greatest freeing mystical power in the universe is the sacred feminine, the divine feminine. So read everything below. Cameron and I have spent a couple of weeks developing, and just look at these quotes she found for us from the fields of mysticism in the Gospel of Thomas, feminist theory in Mary Beard, and Martha. We gotta let Martha dance her way. That is the best statement about creativity of all time. Read it all. Read about the 4 weeks. Read the schedule. We are finding times that work for everybody around the world. We start on Tuesday, January the 25th, and end on a mystical celebration of our freed voices on Saturday, February the 19th. All of that, including registration options, is below. Now, ordinarily, if you've seen any of these, you know that at this point I say, Cameron and I invite you to join us. But we've got we've got 2 humongous invitations for you. Never mind Janet and Cameron, you can tell how excited we are about this intensive. How about rock star invitations? I'm going to give you my rock star invitation, and we're going to close with Cameron's literal invitation from a rock star. Here's mine. In December of 2010, I invited a bunch of friends to come gather in my home for a weekend intensive, a weekend workshop with Laura Lynn Bunn, the greatest Akashic record consultant on the planet. And she drove up from Miami. And when she got here, I don't know why, but I said, hey, would you like to go to Archangel Michael's shrine? She said, well, yeah. So we drove 10 minutes north to Tarpon Springs. It's this adorable handmade little thing. It's, maybe twice the size of my writing office. And it's filled with icons that people have given of Archangel Michael. You can just feel the holiness. And it's there because a family, a Greek Orthodox family in the 1930s, had an 11-year-old child that was dying. The 11-year-old child suddenly sort of came out of his coma and said, get me, or please go home and get the icon of Archangel Michael. Aunt went home, got it, they put it on his body. Next morning, he woke up and asked for breakfast. So the family built this adorable, very sacred, sweet shrine. So we walk in, we're sitting there, and suddenly she elbows me and says, paper, I need paper. Okay, I rip off a piece of paper, I give it to Laura Lynn Bunn. When we got back home, I couldn't stand it anymore. I said, What were you writing? Here's your rock star invitation, straight from Archangel Michael. He said to her, I have been working for 5,000 years to make it safe for you to speak. Now, speak. So I apologize, Michael, that it has taken me this long, 12 years, to get it together, to have a prayer intensive, to help us all free our voices so we can speak. But I'm doing it. So get ready for another rock star invitation from a rock star.
Yes, this is not from Archangel Michael. This is from Patti Smith, who is a rock star. She is a punk rock star, actually, and was just given the keys to New York by Mayor de Blasio. Yeah. So a couple of years ago, my husband and I were attending a Patti Smith concert in Seattle, and she had just sung her song, People Have the Power. And when she finished it, she looked up at the balcony and she pointed right at me and she said, use your voice. My husband looked at me and he goes, I think she's talking to you.
And just like Archangel Michael, I think she's talking to all of us. Come and use your voice. Free your voice, your beautiful, holy, powerful, sacred, feminine voice in Free Your Voice Prayer Intensive. First prayer intensive of 2022. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Patti. Thank you, Charla. Thank you, Cameron. And thank you to every single one of you who is answering those 3 questions and right now making the decision to not be silenced anymore, to speak the words that want to be spoken, and to free their voices. I love you, and I am so excited to bring you Free Your